And now it's Deborah Kobylt Live.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today on Deborah Kobylt Live. I am so excited to introduce to you Nico Juber, a terrific writer, musical writer, who is fresh off the Off-Broadway run of Millennials Are Killing Musicals. What an incredible title, by the way. I think that's so fun. You are also the co-chair of Mistra Moms. You can talk about that. You have a nonprofit, Thrive, Survive Los Angeles. You're a cancer survivor, and you also come from quite an incredible musical family, mom and dad, and grandpa too. We're going to talk about all that. Just think the Brady Bunch, people. Anyway, thanks so much for being here, Nico.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, let's talk about Millennials. Why don't we start that?
Sure.
The musical. What was that about, and where did it come from?
Yeah, so Millennials Are Killing Musicals is about reclaiming authentic happiness in a social media filtered world. And it's a 90-minute, completely original one-act show. We just had a limited 2-week run off Broadway. And we have an album coming out on Yellow Sound label this fall. So this is a show that really centers women. The lead character, Brenda, is finally ready for love and meaning and her creative voice to come out. And her younger sister, Katrina, who's a hashtag influencer, shows up 8 months pregnant, completely unprepared for motherhood. So these women have to shed a Greek chorus of social media filters that are basically messing up their lives in order to find their authentic happiness by the end of the show.
So it was on Off-Broadway for 2 weeks, and I know that it's gotten real critical acclaim. How did that make you feel? Were you nervous? Were the butterflies there? I'm sure they were.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's nerve-wracking at every stage. You know, we called this is a developmental production. So we put it out there to really get it up on its feet for the first time. It's been 4.5 years. When you're developing a new musical, you are stuck at music stands for a long time, really just getting the bones there, getting the music working. Then we actually put it up on its feet, saw it moving in space, saw how the role of the filters worked in terms of just staging. So I think that I learned a lot about the show. The audience learned about the show. It's a really cool process and we really invited the audience into the process. And I can talk a little bit more about that too.
Yeah. Would you please tell me about that? Because I don't know enough about, I love musicals, how it works, how you even develop it, because I'm often in awe when I attend a performance and somebody like you, it starts with somebody like you, right? So tell us.
Yeah, it's generally, if it's not producer driven, right, and it's artist driven, and the spark of creation comes from the writer, and you write this thing, and there are all of these iterations. You do what's called 29-hour readings, where especially if you're working with equity actors, where you have this very short amount of time to workshop something at music stands. And we did that 4 times, and we did concert versions of the show. And so this was the point where we needed to see it move. What does choreography look like? What does staging look like? And what all the design elements and tastes of those, right, as a prototype. So really building kind of a taste of what the show can look like and can be when it goes to its next step. And the only way to do that is to really put it on its feet and let the audience react to it, especially with a comedy, because you can't create comedy in a vacuum.
Yeah. You talked about a music stand. Please, for those of us who don't know, what's a music stand?
Oh, so a music stand literally holding the music on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like, wait, is this like some kind of like lingo that I don't know about in musical theater terms? Okay. I got you.
Just a plain old music stand. Yeah.
We talked earlier, before we're on the air, about the process, right? You explained to me that when writing a musical, you start with a book or script, then the lyrics or words of the song, and then the music, which is the melody. That's real complicated. So you're able to hear all that in your head at the same time, Nico?
I wouldn't say all at the same time. I probably take on and off different hats throughout the process. So I do all 3. I do book, lyrics, and music. That's not true of everybody. Jonathan Larson did the same thing. Some people do one piece of it and that's their craft, and they work at that, and they work on a team. I came at this a little, I know we'll talk a little bit about how I came into this, but
Yeah.
I had all of these, skill sets that sort of intersected in when I made this move and into this industry. So I know it seems like a lot of strange things to converge in one person, but I think it makes a little bit more sense when you know about my genetics and the family that I grew up in.
Yeah, which is really incredible. I'm going to kind of tease it and save it for a little further down in
Sure.
our interview. But what I do want to talk about is what happened to you at the age of 19, and how that changed so much for you, because you were always a very musical person. But at 19, something happened. And therefore, you took different kinds of work because of it. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in college. I went to Tufts University in Boston, and I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so, obviously a horrible phone call for my parents to have to get back out in Los Angeles. And they came out, and I did my chemo over that summer and was determined to go back to school when I could in the fall, and did my radiation treatments while I was in class, which I look back on and go, I don't know what I was thinking, but I think that is sort of who I am as a person, just to kind of put my head down and get through something, and then kind of on the back end go, oh my gosh, what did I just go through? Which I think a lot of young adult cancer survivors have that experience of. But
Yeah.
at that point, because that was back when we didn't have Obamacare, we didn't have any of these resources, I went into a corporate job when I graduated. I was the person that played guitar. I played shows around campus. I was a singer songwriter, and I still did it for fun, but I didn't think it was something I could do sort of professionally, because I needed the benefits from
Wow.
a corporate career. I also wrote spec scripts, sitcom spec scripts, and again, just really put it all aside. And I was also good at it. I worked at Apple, I worked at Adobe. I was there at Adobe for 13 years.
Hmm.
In high tech generally for 15 years in marketing. And I was good at it, and I liked it, and I liked the people that I worked with. But I think ultimately it was never going to be creatively as satisfying as, being in the arts. And I hadn't really allowed myself to kind of think that was a possibility for me professionally until later.
Right. Until years later. So let's talk about that. You became a mom. You're married. You became a mom. Two young kids, and then the time came, because I know I have a piano right over there. You get the piano. You get the piano in the house, and you want to teach the kids some music, right? They got some music lessons. So how did that change you? What was going on with you then?
Yeah, it was about 5 years ago, and I've
Wow.
always played piano, and I mean, I have guitar. I've had guitars in the house. I've always played guitar, but I think it was just having a piano in the center of, at that point we were in a different place. Oh, we actually have two pianos in the house now. I've got one behind me. But having it just in the center of the house and seeing the kids start to play around with music and kind of discover the love of music, and I just sat and started playing again, because I really hadn't played piano in a long time, and just started writing. And I didn't even know where it was coming from. I just started writing songs, and which I hadn't done in such a long time. And I think,
Wow.
yeah, it was kind of bottled up inside for a while.
Right. So you're like, move over, kids. I got something to play. So, what did you start writing initially? I mean, did you have ideas in your head that you wanted to do a musical? Like, how does this even come out of a person when it's sort of been sitting inside your belly for quite a while? Do you know what I mean? Like, what happened? Did it just spill out?
It kind of did. I know that sounds very strange, but it kind of did spill out. And that's been sort of my experience this entire time, and learning to trust that it's all in there. Because I think you go, okay, I wrote one song, I'm never going to do that again. Or I wrote one script, that's the end, or one play. So I think that it was a process of rediscovery of what my creative voice was, and how, that creative energy is not finite. And I didn't know what I was doing at first. I sat down, and even though I had parents that had written musicals in the past, it didn't occur to me that that was sort of where this was going. I was sort of writing these songs that had to do with motherhood, and some of them were funny. And I thought, okay, well, is this a web series? Do I do like kind of a funny series about this? And it started, I think, and I think any playwright will understand this. It starts becoming just, you get curious about questions in your head of like, well, what if this happens? And what
Right.
about this? And what about this? So I started kind of constructing a narrative around what I was writing. And I thought, well, maybe these will be little scenes and, you know, around these songs. And again, thinking a web series. And as I was just writing with no intention, I didn't have an outline, and thinking about, you know, motherhood, identity, our relationship to social media, this story came out. And I, at some point, I think it was about halfway through when I went, yep, no, this is a musical. I think it's a musical. I've accepted it. I think that's the right format for this. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think that's the most satisfying answer, but it's a very strange thing to happen to somebody.
No, it's the answer of an artist. And
Yeah.
that's how it goes. And for anyone out there who's an artist, they fully understand. You know, I've heard Paul McCartney, whom your dad has worked with,
Yeah.
whom you've met. I'm going to repeat that because he's my guy and I want to meet him. And I told him I'll hold your baggage next time you're there meeting him, please. But anyway, he has been quoted as saying many times that in the middle of the night, something will just come to him and he's got a notepad or he'll record it because these thoughts just come at the oddest times, right? You can't necessarily sit down and there it goes. It's not like accounting where you're just, you know, crunching numbers. The creative process is what it is. Isn't that true?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think everyone's experience with creativity is really different. And that's one of the reasons I love networking with other artists, especially other musical writers and playwrights. Because I think that everyone's process is so different. Some people sit and they start with an outline and they've got to storyboard the whole thing out. I'm much more, because I watched the Beatles documentary where Get Back, where they were showing all of the, you know, generative songwriting, where they're kind of pulling it all out of the air. And you're sitting there going, wait a minute, these are the lyrics. How do you not know the lyrics to the song? But I think that's how I write songs. I just sit and I turn on a voice recorder and I sit at the piano and I just start singing, and whatever comes out, comes out. And then I go back and I refine it over and over and over again. So I think that's my experience. It was a little less intentional, whereas some people are so intentional when they start. And I don't think there's a wrong or a right. It's whatever works for you in your process.
Yeah, you were named 2023 Women to Watch on Broadway by the Broadway Women's Fund. You have lots of awards under your belt. That's just one of them. Your songs were selected for Arts Ignite, I believed, at the Art of Wellness benefit. You've got so much. Talk to me about that, because you haven't been doing this that long, as you said yourself, right? Talk to me about the accolades you're getting for your work, and also list, if you would, some of the other plays that you've written and what's coming up in London. You're going to be debuting the play Winner, the musical Winner in London, right?
Yeah. So no, it is pretty wild when I think back on it, because I look at some of my first submissions, because when you're a writer in this world, you submit to things. And I think some of my first artistic statements and resumes said I have absolutely no credentials at all, because I didn't at that point. I didn't study this. I studied philosophy and psychology, which actually come in very handy.
Yes, they do. Yeah, they do.
I think any artistic field. But so quickly I started getting pats on the head from the industry. So, and a lot of things happened during the pandemic. Oddly enough, there was a competition. There's an organization called NAMT, National Alliance for Musical Theater, and they did a short musical challenge, which it had to be brand new material. Anyone who knows me knows I love a speed challenge. I love like, oh, I've got this long to do it. Okay, great. I'm going to write this. And so I wrote a short musical called Hollow, which is a totally weird sci-fi dystopian 15-minute musical. And I ended up winning, being one of the winners of that competition out of nowhere. And that's how I had a production at Beck Center of the Arts, and that's how I got my Dramatist Guild card from that production. So that was a very kind of odd thing to happen to a writer during the pandemic. As the Drama League had a Welcome Back to Broadway kind of competition for songwriting, and I submitted with a collaborator, and we won that as well, and had it her name, Selena Saballo, and it was sung by Andre DeShields at the Drama League benefit. So these are things that, you know, were unbelievable to me as a newcomer to the business. Also being selected as an O'Neill semifinalist 2 years in a row for Millennials. So you start getting a sense, okay, I'm not a one-trick pony. It's not because of who my family is. It's not, you know, I think theater in general, you have nowhere to hide. As a writer, as an artist, as an actor, you don't get to go back and fix it in post. You don't get to, you know, like it's very communal. And so I think that getting that real-time feedback and those pats on the head saying, okay, this is for you, maybe you're good at this. And then now getting named to that list. I mean, no one was more blown away than me to get a notification about that. It's still total imposter syndrome, feels unreal. But I start seeing that, you know, the short plays that I'm writing, I just had one that was about, it's called Birth Control, about abortion access, also kind of set in the future and an alternate timeline. That was just part of a series called The A Chronicles that was performed in New York. And I have another show that you mentioned called Winner that has been in development with a collaborator, Joe Barros. And that's being done by New York Theater Barn and NYCDA in New York, the school. And we just did a reading of it in New York while Millennials was running. So that was kind of a wild thing.
Oh, yeah.
To have two of my shows in New York at the same time. And then we have the upcoming production of that this summer with the London Summer Music Theatre Academy. So excited about that.
Let's talk about women composers, women directing and producing on Broadway. It's still pretty tiny, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, it's gotten better. I think that I haven't seen any updated numbers. So the ones that I've been looking at and talking to people about were back before the pandemic. In 2019, one of the last kind of surveys of it, it was about 13% of women on Broadway writers and 13% directors. So but then the audience is 68% women, which is totally wild as far as who's creating the content and who's consuming the content, and why there's such a big discrepancy there. So I think that's one of the things that got me really fired up about coming into this industry, almost with haven't been a lot of women telling women's stories historically. And that you mentioned books in musical theater, and you know, especially moms, like in this industry, the jokes we actually made a video of while we were doing Millennials was and he kind of joking about that, because that's a question that I get asked a lot when I'm out, you know.
It's true. It's absolutely true. And you also want to see different types of
and we see it more and more in theater. I think in Hollywood, there's definitely more of an awareness to see themselves in media. But I think especially when we're saying that, you know, people who identify media being created by and for is a little bit disheartening, but I see is still really worthwhile is when people come up afterwards and say, I've never seen myself on stage. Millennials is a story that people find their way into. You don't have the generation before that kind of thinks back about motherhood or parenthood. People find their way in terms of their relationship to social media. But I think that you write as if I have a mom or a parent say, I've never seen anything like this before.
Growing up as a kid, you know, I would watch Mary Tyler Moore in reruns, and I know that was considered the stand going on at the time. But even then, when I would watch it, I'd be like, hey, but she's, you know, deferring to, but you're in it, and I know that this is just sort of the beginning of all kinds of incredible content that's to come out there. Do you ever see yourself? You know, like we all dream a little, like there's your name, Nico.
I did watch it, and I watched it with my kids, and just seeing, you know, two incredible non-binary actors winning historically presentation. it's also very cool to watch it and say, oh, the watching it with my kids, I'm like, oh, there's Macy playing piano in the opening, and just kind of feeling the additional orchestrations. She's an incredible role model for so many women to what's happening. And it is a really small business and small industry, not small in terms of kind of the best people that sort of rise into some of these positions. So I still feel like the fangirl who's getting to play out her Broadway dreams.
Mom, dad, and your grandfather was Sherwood Schwartz. Such an incredible creative talent. Your dad, Laurence Juber, played with wings. Your mom, an accomplished actor and writer, a musical writer. They both worked on and composed Gilligan's Island, right, which was a traveling musical that recently just traveled around the country. They're now working on and composing the musical The Brady Bunch. I mean, wow. That whole apple doesn't fall far from the tree in your case really, really is true. So talk to me about growing up with such talented people and what you learned from them, particularly your grandfather.
Yeah. So, I see you have a picture there that was from my grandfather's Hollywood Walk of Fame ceremony.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's your mom right behind her, whom I've interviewed, by the way, Hope. And she is just lovely. Absolutely lovely.
She says hello, by the way.
Oh, I just had such a, look. Oh my gosh. Is that you with your grandfather?
Yeah. I don't think I've changed very much. I think about the same, but
you have the same little face. What a cute little face. Talk to me about what you learned from him, because what delightful shows he created. You know what I mean? Just so delightful.
I think the thing that I learned a lot from him as a creative. I mean, he also was a playwright. He loved writing for theater, and also wrote up until the day that he died. I mean, he just never stopped, because I think that, when you are creative and you do the thing that you love to do, you keep doing it, right? Whether or not you're getting paid for it, whether or not anyone's going to read it or listen to it or whatever it is. So I think I internalized a lot from that. I think also growing up as part of a family where seeing creative endeavors sort of having the cultural impact that they could have, at the time, I mean, it was pretty revolutionary to, at that point with Gilligan, when that came out, to have all of these people from different backgrounds having to get along together on an island. I mean, socioeconomic. And of course, we've gotten much further in terms of diversity and, all of the other metrics, but kind of thinking historically, that was a big deal. And the same thing with Brady, having divorced parents with different kids coming together. This was edgy at that point. I think edgy has changed a lot. But I also
edgy edgy has definitely changed. Edgy has definitely changed a lot. But coming from, an Italian background where it was, let's just say, very different from the Bradys. They were quiet and sweet. And every night at my dinner table, something was going on if something wasn't being thrown somewhere. And in a very loving way. I don't know. So for me, I would just sort of look at it in fascination and say, are there really people like that out there? But you're right. They were divorced. They had a housekeeper that helped Carol. At least in my day, we didn't have that. God knows, growing up, right, in Jersey. In fact, my mother was a housekeeper, so forget it. So it was so different. And you're right, edgy then. And that too also paved a way for what edgy will be in 2023. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's because it's all in context of the time and that things have evolved so much since then. But I think that seeing, there's a staying power to those shows that people still watch. I mean, I show them to my kids that, people watch them multi-generationally. I think one of the things that's really cool about both shows is that adults and kids can enjoy them because there's something for everyone. And so I think seeing having the power to shift culture in the arts, but then also so meaningful to people's lives as like core beliefs about what art can do was very foundational for me, I would say. And so kind of drives what I'm doing as far as going, okay, it may not seem like a big deal to have this show with the silly title, Millennials Are Killing Musicals, talking about generational angst, talking about, what we're dealing with social media, but then also centering 3 women, really 4, because the grandmother character too,
Right.
as the leads. But that is meaningful to people. And I think that it has a broader implication than people can kind of see when, if you have that kind of thing get elevated onto a stage like Broadway, where that does shift culture. And I think that that's been a very, it's a small community. There's only so many Broadway shows every year. And I think that kind of trying to keep that bigger vision of how meaningful that is in terms of representation and all of that. So I do think that he kind of just put those things in my head. And then also I know when we talked earlier, I had shared a story with you about there was one winter that I was, home from college, and I didn't have anything to do. And so my grandfather basically hired me as his assistant to come in and write checks to charity. That's because he had so many that he wanted to write, and that it was important to him to do, and that he didn't want to just give to one because then he felt like, he wanted to give, but he really gave a lot away throughout his life. And sort of seeing him do that and actively wanting to be charitable and ethical and supportive of other people was very important to him. I think, and this is same with my parents, same. So I think that that's, again, very kind of core foundational of how I try to operate in the world, and hopefully can live up to.
Yeah. You talked about, changing with the times. You know what I think is a kind of a critical one right now? You might not even be thinking about this because you're a year or two younger than me. Um, a lot of these women, and well-known women like Andie MacDowell, and now I just read, oh my gosh, Jennifer Aniston, kind of letting their hair sort of grow in and show as they get older. You know what I mean? And I'm looking at that going, oh, do I do that? Like, in other words, let's break down this barrier. It's okay. It's okay if somebody wants to go gray. It's okay if somebody wants to go white. It's okay if they're aging. And because there's parts for everybody, right? There's work for everybody out there. Gosh, I think it was in the day, if you were 30, you were washed up. It's like, you got to be kidding me. And we all know who decided that, right? It wasn't women.
Yeah.
And now you can be working and thriving, I believe, at any age. And women, ahead of me, who are saying, this is who I am. This is my age. I'm owning it. I love that. I think that's sort of the next wave, which is, people getting older, because you're not disposable. I think you could, just like your grandfather, you could be working until your last moment. And I think that's very inspiring, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we've seen now people winning, the highest awards, I like over 60. I mean, it's, just thinking, I'm never going to do this again, or no one's ever going to hire me. And suddenly now 60 is the age where, things have started happening for their first time. So I think we're re-examining what aging means. But that's absolutely something I felt when I worked in the corporate world. Was especially, I think I look pretty young. So I never felt old enough to be taken seriously. And then, and then even in this business, it's like, well, once you hit 40 or you're older, then you're too old now. It's like, well, when is the perfect age for women? Like, you're either too young or you're too old. Is there like,
no,
I don't know.
There's no age, there's no young, there's no old, there's nothing. I also believe that's a really great part about social media and streaming and all that stuff, because you can create your own content. This is my creation of my own content. Yeah. I mean, I used to be on the news. I was reporting and anchoring. And when I decided to get back after my 3 kids, I thought, I don't know, do I really want to be reporting on a car chase and a murder? No. So I thought, let me create something of my own and interview people that I find interesting, that I think my audience would find interesting. But now let's just briefly touch upon mom and dad. Let's start with mom, please, and the work that she's done. And then, of course, dad.
Yeah, I think that I've been inspired a lot by my mom, especially, so we grew up, my mom also, in addition to acting, producing, writing, all of the things that she does. She had a comedy rock and roll band called The Housewives when I was a kid. So one of my memories, or some of my memories, are going to their concerts and like helping sell, tapes or whatever, like, and being there, but also seeing her continuing to follow her passions and then writing songs about what she was going through. So we joke a lot about like that genetic thing happened to me and it kicked in my, in my 30s, where it's like, oh, I got to write songs about all this stuff. And so I think we kind of had a similar journey there, but she's also, an incredibly talented book writer and lyricist. And I know she composes with my dad as well, but I think the clever lyric gene is one that I will say specifically, I think comes right from her. So, and I know my sister benefits from it too, as a pop songwriter. And my dad, he's had a really interesting career, obviously. Wings, Paul McCartney, he's an incredible guitarist. He does a lot of session work, and he's also worked in theater. And so I think having parents that kind of understand this world a little bit has been really helpful, even though every show and every path and journey is a little bit different when you're kind of making your way into the business. But so yeah, I think, he's very business minded. Not that my mom's not, but I think I always joke with him that he would have been an accountant or something had he not been a guitarist, just because he's very sort of logical and functional about the way that, setting up his business and touring and all of those logistics. Like, he does a lot kind of on his own. I think people don't even realize. So I had all of that as role modeling for me on, thinking of yourself as an entrepreneur, as an artist, and the writing, the songwriting. So I think it makes a little bit more sense that a musical fell out of me with all of that context, because I can't take any credit for anything that my family has done. But I will say that it absolutely was, foundational to me kind of interacting in the world and learning how to hone those skill sets, for sure.
Look, there's talent there, but then comes the hard work, right? A lot of people have talent. In your case, you and your family have both. Give me one nugget, please, about Paul McCartney that I can end this show on, because I told you he's my all-time crush from the day I was aware of humanity. It's Paul McCartney. Would you give me something? What's he like? I know you're going to say, oh, he's a nice guy, but something.
One little nugget. So every time he's seen me, because I've met him quite a few times, I know you're going to be mad at me for saying that, he runs up, says, "Hi, Nico," gives me a kiss on the cheek. This guy knows everyone, and he's met millions of people. I mean, how can you be Paul McCartney and not have met millions upon millions of people and fans? And the fact that he remembers, he's apparently one of those people that just remembers every single person he's ever met.
Wow.
So you can rest assured that if he meets you once, he'll remember you. So that's good.
I'll remember that when I meet him, Nico. I really it's going to happen one day. I don't quite know where or when, but it's going to happen. Anyway, I'm so grateful that you joined our show today. Please give a shout out to what's next with you in London, just to remind our audience. And is there anything coming up here in LA or in New York again, please?
So again, part of this London Summer Music Theatre Academy, this is happening. I believe the performances are August 8th and 9th. I don't have any details about that yet, but it's really a student program where we can workshop the show. So I'm super excited about that. And then I don't have anything else locked yet, other than the album for Millennials Are Killing Musicals is coming out beginning of September on Yellow Sound label. So look for that wherever you stream your music. And we're really excited to share the music of the show with everyone.
Yeah. So wonderful. Lots and lots of big things are ahead for you. I just know it, Nico. And keep me and our audience apprised with everything, would you please? Because I'm going to be following everything that you do. I'm real excited about it. Also, I want to give a shout out to our friends at Bra. That's how I met you, right? At a luncheon for Bra. And that was Carrie is the creator of Bra. And also our friends Catherine and Deborah. They introduced us initially. So I want to say thank you to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, all right, everybody, please look up Nico Juber. That's Juber. Nico is Nico, just to check out her latest work. And millennials, wait, what's it called again? Millennials are, wait,
Killing.
millennials are killing musicals. I was about to say musicals are killing millennials. I'm like, no, Deborah, that's not it. Millennials are killing musicals. Check that out. And we look forward to keeping track of what's going on with you and anybody. To hear our interview, just look up Deborah Kobylt Live. This will be on YouTube, on Facebook, and then on Instagram, and then it's transferred over into an audio podcast, and you'll find us on iHeart Radio. You'll find us on Apple and just about Amazon, just about anywhere else you get your podcast. Just look us up and you'll find our interview. And please tell your friends too. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And we'll